Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
But the other thing I really want to tell you about is the Unexplained. It premieres July 19th at 10 p.m. on the History Channel, and it deals with unexplained mysteries that abound. We talk about a guy gets hit on the head in a car accident, and when he's in a coma, when he gets up, he can play the piano. Like a concert pianist. He's never seen a piano. Why? How? When? These are some of the extraordinary mysteries that the Unexplained, which will be on at 10 p.m. on the History Channel starting July 19th.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. This is Douglas Viviani with our very own unexplained mystery man himself, David Cohen.
Yes, how are you, Doug?
I barely can hear you. Got to get close to that mic, my man.
Yes, I'm here.
There we go. And special guest this week we have is an American television and film producer, director, screenwriter. He's a driving force behind the currently airing Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Oak Island, The Curse of Civil War Gold, and the new Netflix Lost in Space, and now the new History Channel show Unexplained, and even more. In fact, Kevin Burns has created, executive produced, written, and or directed more than 800 hours of television program. He's also known to have the world's best Munsters memorabilia collection. We'll get to that at some point. We'll try to investigate all these topics and more with a true friend of the show of Everything Old is New Again, returning to our show once again, Kevin Burns. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hey, thank you, guys. It's great to be with you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Your time is valuable, and we really appreciate you spending some time with us. And let's start off just with our omnipresent Star Trek reference. Every show that we have here on Everything Old is New Again almost has a Star Trek reference, and we heard William Shatner there explaining a little bit of this new show on History Channel, Unexplained. Tell us a little bit about that show that you're executive producing with William Shatner. What's it about, and what's it like to work with the man himself?
Well, this was an idea that the network and I have been talking about for quite a while. They came to me some time ago, because we were doing The Curse of Oak Island and Ancient Aliens, and both were doing very, very well. And they said, we would love you to see about doing In Search Of, a new In Search Of. And they asked me to research the rights into it, and at that time, the rights were very complicated, and we weren't able to make a deal because it was co-owned, the underlying rights to the original show, by both Universal and Fremantle. So subsequently, they did, of course, make a deal with the owners, and they have a series on the air with Zachary Quinto. So the Zachary Quinto show turned out a little differently than they thought, meaning it was investigative and it was interesting and covered a lot of great topics, but they were still looking for another show that was a little bit more indulgent into what they like to call the Ooga Booga, like what they think that we do very well with Ancient Aliens. And so I had suggested a title that the network also had rights to called The Unexplained, although we altered the spelling with Unexplained, kind of a little sly wink to X-Files. And so we were developing that show, and then I had worked with William Shatner. I worked with him years ago on a TV Guide science fiction special, but that was very brief and literally only had about 4 or 5 hours together. But of course, I've always been a huge fan of his. But when we were doing last year's season finale for Ancient Aliens, and it was a kind of a 50th anniversary tribute to Chariots of the Gods and Edward von Daniken, we invited Mr. Shatner to be part of that show, and it was one of the best shows we did last year. Got a great rating, and it convinced me that I should suggest to the network that maybe Mr. Shatner would be a great host, narrator for this show we were developing called The Unexplained. And they thought it was a great idea. Rob Chernow, who is head of all of the A&E networks, including A&E Lifetime and History, is a friend of Shatner because they did a show anyway, it led to me reaching out to Mr. Shatner. He was thrilled. We met with him. He was totally interested, very excited about it. And he and I just, I have to say, we hit it off. And he was, very curious-minded, tremendous energy. And I just have to say that in the months now that we've been working with him, hosting and narrating the program, and I probably hear from him now literally every day, because there isn't a day that goes by that he's not texting me or calling me about something he's read or an idea that he's had for the show. He's not just some hired gun. He's a total partner in this process.
Yeah, he's amazing with that. I mean, I see him at Star Trek Convention. You see him on all the different shows. He's, I think, 80. I don't know the exact age, but he's
88 years old.
88
years old. And I swear to God, he could run circles around me.
When you see him on, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You see him on like stage on like a Star Trek convention, which is, it is what it is. But he goes out there, and he's not just one of these people that says, "Oh, let's hear some questions, let's get some answers and questions going." He has, and he brings to every single time he's on the stage a different story, a different take of what's going on in his life, and everything is interesting and has a smile to it. So I don't know where he gets his crazy reputation. I think the guy is over the top amazing, and I think he'd be great for this show.
I have to say, because look, in all the work that I've done with him, and I've heard from other people who've worked with him, but I do think that there is a truth in the following. I don't think he has a lot of patience with people who he thinks waste his time.
Right.
In other words, I don't think he, quote unquote, suffers fools well. So I think he gives as good as he gets. And if people are sincere and they're asking interesting questions and they're not trying to be foolish or exploit him, he's a tremendous, tremendous partner. He's very, very funny. He's very quick-witted. But I do think that in other words, I'm sure he can be difficult in some circumstances. I also think he's slightly defensive about that reputation because he doesn't understand it. Like he doesn't know where people come from who say he's kind of difficult, because I don't find that at all. But I do think that he really has a tremendous thirst for knowledge, and he loves to be engaged, and he wants to be challenged, and I just find him a tremendous amount of fun to work with.
And that was the thought of my mind, is that he doesn't suffer fools well. So and who does? Like, the gentleman has done so much. He just wants to move on and wants to present more entertainment. I mean, he's an entertaining person. He's not in his mind, quote, just an actor or just a narrator or just a producer or a director. He's a kind of a Renaissance kind of a guy. I bet you he even would like radio and maybe even being on a radio show once in a while.
Oh, no. He would absolutely do it, and I know he has done it. And also he's very involved in charity. I mean, first of all, he's a horse fanatic. I mean, he owns 4 horses. He's owned stables and things. And this is something I've heard of, but I've gotten to know a little bit more about since I've gotten to know him. And like he says, he gets up every morning and he rides 4 different horses for like an hour each to exercise these horses and to give himself exercise. I mean, and they have actually, over the course of time, he's got a lot of arthritis in his back. I mean, he does suffer from some chronic pain, but he doesn't really let it get to him. I mean, he has a very strong constitution, had a very interesting history, very devoted to his wife and kids and grandchildren. I'd say more so than any kind of big circle of friends. He doesn't seem like a guy who has some posse of friends, outside of being very devoted to his family and his horses. And this charity, I actually went with a group of people from my office. We contributed to this charity that he does, this fundraiser for disabled children, where they use equine or horses, equine therapy, where horses provide emotional stability to disabled kids, and also disabled veterans with PTSD. They get them to work with horses and ride horses, and it's really amazing. And he's very, very hands-on. I mean, I don't think he does anything with a kind of a half interest. If he's interested, he's all in.
And he's got topics, as you said, for the show, whether he brought it or you brought it to the table or someone else. Can you give us a hint at some of the topics that might be covered by Unexplained as it's coming up on History Channel?
Well, it premieres Friday, July 19th. The first episode is called Evil Places, and we cover about 6 different places. There are 6 acts in a 1-hour show, obviously because they have commercial breaks, but each of the acts is a different topic. So the first one is Evil Places, where we go to the Shawnee Amusement Park, which is a notoriously haunted place where it was an amusement park for children, but there were mysterious deaths associated with it.
Oh boy, we got to take a hard break here. We'll be back right after this on Everything Old is New Again with Kevin Burns. We'll continue talking about Unexplained. We'll get into Lost in Space and more right here on Everything Old is New Again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Yes, and we're also here with the creator and producer of Unexplained with William Shatner, Ancient Aliens, Curse of Oak Island, Curse of the Civil War Gold, all on History Channel, and then Netflix, Lost in Space. Kevin Burns will continue talking. What do you think about Unexplained?
There's also a place in, like the most haunted house in North America. There's other places that are known to be kind of disturbing or weird places. So we cover that in episode 1. Episode 2 is Mysterious Structures, and we cover everything from the Winchester Mystery House to the Lalibela churches in Ethiopia, and just weird places and how they were built and how no one can understand how some of these structures were made, like the Loretto Staircase in New Mexico at the Loretto Chapel. And then in episode 3, it's Strange Creatures, it's Cryptids, it's the Goat Man, Chupacabra, some of the other creatures that we covered in a show I recently did for Travel Channel called In Search of Monsters, by the way. And then Mysterious Nature, or Unnatural Nature is the 4th episode, where we talk about just weird places that are natural wonders, but they're confounding in terms of how they work. Everything from a place in Maracaibo where lightning strikes 360 days a year, like lightning storms over this one place, and no major scientists can figure out why. So, and I have to say, as he reads the script, and we've had meetings. I mean, I was so impressed, by the way, early on in the process. He said, "I want to come to the office and meet the team," and that has never happened in my experience with anybody of his stature or less. He's certainly an icon, but he said, "I want to meet the writers, I want to meet the producers, and sit with them and talk to them." And we sat for 4 hours.
Wow!
And they were just captivated. And so when we're in the recording studio, he reads through the scripts, and he reads them in advance, and he'll say, "Wow, and I'll do my amateur Shatner impression." But it's like, this is exactly what we want. This is it. This is the show. It's right here. This is what we want to do. We want more of it. And he's so into it. We did Alien Con a couple of weeks ago, and I was interviewing him on stage. He wanted me to be the one that interviewed him, and I had to break into my William Shatner, and I said, "Why do you talk like this? Why do you speed up and then slow down?" And he said, and he was such a good sport. He goes, "Because I want to think about what I'm going to say." And then I said, "But you take so long."
That's great. He's got a great sense of humor, and that's what comes forward too on the air. And so there is a team. In other words, with this show, of course, he's narrating. Apparently, I'm assuming in the studio, and then you've got an investigative team out in the field, or is it a documentary?
Yeah. There's a whole team of producers and researchers and writers and people who gather footage and clips and whatever. But and we do studio like host reps. It's kind of old fashioned in that way, because that what I found, like I used to do a lot of shows with hosts and celebrity narrators back in the 90s, and then for budget reasons and for international distribution reasons, believe it or not, that kind of has faded away. I mean, there's very, very few shows, documentary shows, that are, quote, hosted anymore. And, there are reality shows, but there are not a lot of hosted documentary shows. And I wanted to kind of bring that back, bring back that kind of Twilight Zone, In Search of, Ripley's Believe It or Not quality, where you have a personality, because these shows are basically anthologies. I mean, they're all on a kind of a theme, kind of like Ancient Aliens, but you may think you're not that interested in natural wonders as much as you are cryptid creatures. But I think by having a personality, especially one like Mr. Shatner, presented, it kind of not only brings everything together, but it gives it a credibility that makes you feel like you're in good hands during that hour, and you're going to have a fun time during that hour. I have to say, his presentation on camera is so vintage Shatner. But I will say, I take a certain amount of credit, and I'm slightly proud of the fact that he can embrace, because he's got a great sense of humor about himself. But a lot of the things he's done more recently, even, God bless him, the commercials were so clean. The thing that cleans up the CPAP, with people who have sleep apnea, and he has this fun, puckish, comic sensibility. He's very funny, but we've shaded him back to what I'd call vintage Shatner, much more Twilight Zone, much more serious, less kind of funny, although he has fun with it. I mean, there's always a twinkle in his eye. But you're going to see a performance from him that's really quite extraordinary. In other words, we've brought back what I'd call, vintage, classic William Shatner.
That's great. And how many episodes have been ordered? Is that what they say? How many are you scheduled to do so far?
Well, it was going to be 6 because networks are very shy now. But the minute we got him on board, it went to 8. So I'm very happy about that. And the upcoming shows are going to be Mysteries of the Brain and Life Beyond Death. And they're just stories that are human stories, but they are confounding. They're stories that science really can't find answers to. And are they metaphysical? Are they are they supernatural? They run the gamut from a lot of different reasons why we can't quite get to the bottom of what's going on, which makes them. I mean, I'm a curious-minded person. We've talked about that before. It's why I love Ancient Aliens. It's why I love Oak Island. I love mysteries. I love things that people can't just dismiss as, oh, that's nothing or that's easy. So this show is, look, I've done. I think it's actually more than 800 hours of television. I think it's creeping on 1,000 at this point. But and I've been proud to do a lot of different stuff. I mean, biography and backstory, and The Girls Next Door, and of course, The Curse of Oak Island. But this has become one of my, I'd say, the 4 or 5 shows that I'm the most proud of that I've ever done.
That's tremendous, and it has a little touch of, like you said, a little touch of In Search of, a little touch of Twilight Zone-ish. I mean, you have quite a variety of topics, so we've gone through some of these topics ourselves on the air, and it's on people's minds. It's something that I'm sure you tune in. You're going to tune in maybe for Shatner and what have you, but you're going to get sucked into these topics. I know the way you produce, and it's going to be something that I'm sure will be more than 8 episodes. You got to watch this Unexplained. I'm sure that when we get involved with this, it's going to be one of these ones that you're going to be taping and you don't want to miss on History Channel Friday nights at 10 o'clock.
Following Ancient Aliens, by the way, which is in its 12th season, and that's an extraordinary story because the network didn't just order 10 or 15 episodes, they've ordered 40.
Wow, that's unbelievable. They ordered 40 from you, last year or just recently? Is that what you're saying? Because it was...
It was originally going to be about 10 or 12, and then they found that the show does so well, and not only well in premieres, but particularly well in repeats, that it's an international favorite, not just here in the United States. So, no, they just came back and said, because they were premiering it in the summer, where Friday night, you can imagine during the summer, viewership is very, very small.
Right.
It's as small as it's going to get. And I had kept saying, look, Oak Island does extraordinarily well, but it also does well because, it premieres in November. Days are short. It's dark early, and people like to, on a Friday night in the winter and the fall, they like to come home and snuggle. And if they're going to watch TV, they're going to do it when the nights are long. So the network took me up on it and said, no, we really should, do a summer run, which is kind of typical for Ancient Aliens, but we also should do some premieres in the wintertime. So we're going to be running original episodes right now every Friday night, but then there's going to be kind of another relaunch in October. So we've got a lot of really great episodes ahead. And by the way, I'm also doing another new show, which you may not be aware of yet, called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. But we're going to cover that in an Ancient Aliens episode as a kind of a lead into it, because that's going to be the show that follows Curse of Oak Island in November at 10 o'clock. And just as Ancient Aliens is going to lead into the Unexplained at 9 o'clock on Friday, but we're going to probably get Shatner out to Oak Island this year as part of the Unexplained, and try to get him to Skinwalker Ranch. So when I was a kid, I loved when the Beverly Hillbillies went to Hooterville to have Thanksgiving dinner with the cast of Green Acres and Petticoat Junction. So I love that. So if we can do things where, Giorgio and Shatner get together to do Ancient Aliens, or we had Marty Lagina last year go with Giorgio to the island of Sardinia, because so many of these mysteries overlap, and if you approach them from different points of view, you get a lot of different information and different takes on what the solutions could be.
And we'll be back right at this on Everything Old is New Again, talking to Kevin Burns about Curse of Oak Island and maybe even some Lost in Space and, of course, Unexplained and more, even the Munsters. We'll be back right after this on Everything Old is New Again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
There is an island in the North Atlantic where people have been looking for an incredible treasure for more than 200 years. So far, they have found bits of gold chain, a stone slab with strange symbols carved into it, even a 17th century Spanish coin. To date, 6 men have died trying to solve the mystery. And, according to legend, 1 more will have to die before the treasure can be found.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. This is Douglas Viviani with David Cohen. David, you still with us here?
I am, sir.
Okay. And we're having a great time once again with a friend of the show. And this is a gentleman that has been responsible for over 1,000 hours of entertainment, including Ancient Aliens, Curse of Oak Island, The Curse of Civil War Gold, the new Netflix Lost in Space, and now the new Unexplained on the History Channel, upcoming Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. We're just going to continue down the road here with Kevin Burns.
I could tell you Secrets of Skywalker Ranch too.
That's a whole nother show.
That's another show.
I'll tell you, I've interviewed myself once in a while, every Friday on a station out in California and a couple other stations, and they've heard your interview with us. It was a 2-episode show a little ways back, and we did speak about a number of topics, but one came up was the Curse of Oak Island, and the hosts of these local radio shows think that I have some inside word because I spoke to you about the Oak Island, and they were excited about this year and the new finds and the new exploration, but they're presenting me with the task of asking you what we can expect, and I know there's going to be some limitations here, but what can we expect from Season 7 of Oak Island? Is there something more than we've seen so far? Are they going to explore different areas and or find something? I know that's going to be difficult to answer, but I know you're saying William Shatner might be on the show. What else can we expect for Season 7?
Well, the end of Season 6, Season 6 to me was extraordinary because, even though they haven't found pirate treasure or gold doubloons or anything like that, and yes, I have to admit they have not yet found the Ark of the Covenant or any Templar strongholds, but they keep finding, and it is a head scratcher, and the guys go through, as the audience does, because it's all very real. I mean, I have to stress that it's all very, very, very real. We plant nothing, we stage nothing, we don't fake anything. So the audience is on the same ride that Rick and Marty and Craig and all the guys up there are on, which is sometimes it's a dead end, sometimes they're very depressed, sometimes they have a breakthrough. But what they've never been able to figure out, and we can't figure out, is, and it's usually just when they're about to give up on something, they'll find pieces of a book or leather binding or parchment with writing on it or human bones, and it or they'll find a gold brooch or some piece of jewelry that an expert in Canada anyway dated to be perhaps 600 to 700 years old. So there's so much extraordinary stuff. But the big revelation last year, there were two of them toward the end of the season, which was in Smith's Cove. They finally were able to effectively cofferdam off, basically wall off the ocean around the cove, and then dig what was about 10 feet deep. And then they exposed, if people watched the show, this elaborate, almost workings of what could have been a dock or ancient slipway, meaning where they could have dragged ships up on shore, usually to dragging boats up on land, but there were weird walls and weird barriers, and they found what they thought was evidence of this box drain system, which was creating what has been believed for at least 100 years, flood tunnels that are the reason why when you try to dig into the money pit, it fills with water after about a depth of 50, 60 feet. And, there was a tremendous breakthrough. They found that all of that wood that was used to make this kind of engineering center on Smith's Cove predated the finding of the money pit, which was a big thing for Marty Lagina, because Marty's always been very, very skeptical. I mean, he kind of thought that most of the activity on this island happened after 1795. Well, they found conclusive evidence that all of these workings were done in the 1760s and 1770s, 20 to 30 years before the quote-unquote discovery of the money pit. So that just means something did happen prior to these boys, these teenage boys, Daniel McGinnis and his friends, finding what they thought was evidence of a hole where somebody had buried something. So that was very exciting. The other thing is they did sonar scanning of the swamp area, and found that, and this was not revealed in the episode, it was revealed in a supplemental special that aired the following week, because we didn't have the information, and we're going to remind people of it in the first episode. But they found evidence of what could be a ship buried in the swamp. Well, so the swamp is certainly a focus of interest this season. Smith's Cove continues to be a focus of interest, tracking down this flood tunnel, which may lead directly to the money pit, and the money pit itself, and doing more than just kind of poking holes into it. which is tremendously expensive. In fact, I had a conversation with the guys the other day about what they might be facing if they're going to really tackle this thing beyond where they are this season, and it's formidable. I mean, to dig anything like a major hole, is in the tens of millions of dollars, and that's just not money that comes very easily, and they've been committing quite a bit of money to this, and of course the audience has invested the time it takes to watch these episodes, but hopefully they're not disappointed and they're enjoying this journey as much as we are.
Well, that's what I'm hearing. It's constant questions and inquiry about this. And when you had the final episode, they had me on right away to talk about it. I don't know how I became the representative of the show for a couple of these radio stations, but we do talk about it and have a lot of fun trying to figure out. And I enjoyed I think it was somewhere with some of a overhead shot where you could look into the swamp and actually see the outline of what appears to be a ship. So that was the big takeaway I took.
It is all confounding. Look, the very first time I was ever on the island, which was now 7 years ago, I went into Dan Blankenship's basement, and on his wall he had a big aerial photograph of the island. And this is even before Google Images. And the first thing that struck me, and I knew nothing. I mean, I knew of no theory. I knew of nothing. And I just said, these were two islands artificially put together. I said, they don't look natural. Right. It looks like in fact the road that goes from the western portion to the eastern portion, which that runs right on the southern edge, and separates the ocean from the swamp. I said it doesn't make sense, and then we found geologically the two halves of the island are made out of two entirely different forms of stone. And Fred Nolan, I found out, and we've covered this in the show, but Fred Nolan, one of the other landowners, who was Dan Blankenship's arch rival and arch nemesis, but he believed that the two island halves were joined by a cofferdam system. The property his house is on was landfill, but the swamp, this weirdly triangular-shaped swamp, was artificial. And again, like everything else, when you're dealing with water and the ocean, and now, it's all complicated, of course, by environmental concerns, because, back in the 1850s and early 20th century, nobody cared if you dug things up or blew things up. Now, of course, you can't.
We're going to have to take a break here again. We are here with the driving force behind the History Channel Friday night at 10 Unexplained with William Shatner, Ancient Aliens, Curse of Oak Island, and more. Lost in Space, Kevin Burns will be back right after this on Everything Old is New Again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
And we're here with Kevin Burns talking about the Curse of Oak Island at present, and we're trying to get an idea about the Laganas and what they had to deal with the environmental issues. Where were we when we left off there, Kevin?
So right. The Laganas, even on their own property, can't dig up the swamp without an army of permit, and then you have to. And you can't, weirdly enough, you can't just drain the water from the swamp into the ocean. You have to displace it to another place on the island. And then you have to take all that muck, and I mean it's foul-smelling, horrible, decomposing plant and animal matter, and all that muck has to be displaced to another place on the island. And then when you're done, it all has to be put back.
Mm. Oh boy.
I mean, in other words, the rigorous environmental issues. I would say I'm not going to speak to the merits of it, but they have slowed down what the Laginas are capable of doing.
Right, and they've got to have that expert there all the time. When they've got to find something, they've got to have that fella come along and make a determination. Can they do this?
Well, and it's very, when we found human bones, that was a huge concern, and you have, they don't call them Native Americans, obviously. They don't call them Native Canadians. They're the native, the indigenous people are called the First Nations people. And, and they're always very concerned about, is there a burial ground? Is there some artifact? Is there some evidence of, Native history? And of course, we're finding evidence of things that are probably pre-Native history. You were finding petroglyphs and megaliths and all these other kinds of things in the area, which, so for me and for the network and hopefully for the viewers, the thing that sustains me about the show is there's great history in it. I mean, it is in many ways. I mean, we don't push this and we're not arrogant about it, but this show really is in many ways rewriting the history of North America. It is certainly opening the door to forcing all of us to rethink. Did Europeans come here as early as the 14th century or earlier?
Right.
Are the indigenous peoples, because let's face it, Native Americans and indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples, didn't grow out of the ground. I mean, there is no such thing as indigenous people. They migrated from somewhere. They may have been here first, but they came from somewhere.
Right.
And we're finding that even in Ancient Aliens, we're finding migration patterns and evidence of religious artifacts. In fact, in some of the recent episodes of Ancient Aliens, that people from Polynesia and India went through South America and possibly up north to what is now North America. They came from Asia. They came from North Africa. They came from Europe and the Nordic countries. So even we tend to think of Native Americans as some single tribal ethnicity, but they didn't. There were hundreds of tribes. They spoke hundreds of different languages. They each had many, many different ancestries, and they also didn't all get along with each other. I mean, we like to oversimplify the history of Europeans in North America, but the history of Native Americans interacting with and warring with and killing each other is a vast story that is hardly told.
And we'll then stay tuned for the upcoming season of The Curse of Oak Island to hear and see some of those secrets revealed little by little as they peel the onion. I'm going to pivot a little bit here because I know Kevin has other interests as well. And my question is, first and foremost, do you remember, we did a show a little ways back on Chiller Theater and Creature Feature as a kid. Do you remember that, watching that in Schenectady growing up?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Chiller. And it came out of WTEN Channel 10, Albany, New York.
There you go. And they would have sometimes these big monster movies, the Godzillas and so forth. And now we see the King of Monsters out. So we did a little show about that. And, we'd love those, like The Thing and Them and Beast of 20,000 Phantoms and all of that. So we mentioned you in a show previously. So I'm going to play a little bit of a clip and see what your reaction is here on this. It's just about 40 seconds long.
Why don't we think about creating or suggesting someone create a monster channel, a creature feature channel? Why don't they have Sci-Fi Channel? They got all these channels.
Yeah, you think they have a channel for everything, right?
This would be tremendous on a Saturday afternoon to revisit and have kids kind of just have some fun with this.
And it would be cool, too, to have like hosts like they do at Turner Classic Movies in between the movies, because there's a lot of really good stories behind them, how they were made and the technology they used in the 60s versus now. I think I like that idea,
actually. Yeah, I mean...
Why don't we start that?
I really think I'm going to suggest that to some, maybe who's in television, to Kevin Burns. I mean, seriously, why don't I
not?
suggest something like that?
Sure.
He's open-minded. He's a friend of the show.
He liked the Munsters. He likes the Munsters.
Yeah, right, he does. I just think it's something that it's really missing.
Of course, we're tongue-in-cheek a little bit here, but I just wanted to mention and show that we have you on our mind here and there, and boy, wouldn't it be fun? There's so many of these big monster movies that no one's investigating. Maybe there's another project for you down the line, like you have nothing else on your plate.
Well, people have tried channels like that, and Sci-Fi Channel, kind of started with a little bit of that mandate. But Universal, which owns Sci-Fi Channel, they have, there are different streaming channels and cable channels, and there was one called Scream, and of course AMC, their parent company, had years ago did an HD channel called Munsters HD, which was very much along those lines. And we did a lot of interstitials for them, hosted by Elvira. And we did a series, in fact, I produced it with Dan Roebuck, called Monsterama. And we did these little 10, 15-minute kind of really cool profiles about everyone from Rick Baker and Tori Ackerman and Ray Harryhausen and Basil Gogos, Rick, Bob Burns. So we had a lot of fun with that, and people have done that. I mean, they've tried that, but the problem is there's so many different places to get content. It's hard for those things to work the way you'd want them to.
Exactly.
But I would want.
Yeah, it's a plethora of material out there, and it's hard for the kid. Like for us, it was kind of easy, right? We had like the 5 channels, and we'd wake up on Saturday afternoon, and we'd watch, I think it was Creature Feature at that point, at 12 in the afternoon, and certainly it had it on at nighttime as well. And you'd watch these big monster movies, and almost had no choice in a way to watch it. But it just holds a special part in our hearts, all of us that have seen that. And now, as a child, now you've got 500 channels to choose from, so it makes it difficult to really narrow it down and figure out what the heck you're going to watch for a day and hold.
Well, that's
hold it
why getting back to Shatner. That's why I think personalities help cut through the clutter. I mean,
right.
I think what's going to make the Unexplained unique is Shatner. I think what made a lot of these movie channels unique is if they had hosts and
right.
And when we did Biography, it had Peter Graves, and Elvira, or whether it's Ghoulardi or it's what was M.T. Graves, some of the names of the great horror hosts. Of course, Turner, Al Lewis, Grandpa Munster did his show Mystery Science Theater. So I think hosts are good ways to get people to kind of tune in, so that they don't just seem like things you can get on your DVD.
Right, exactly, and then have some content. We'll have them add a little bit something to the mix, of course. And we're then talking a little bit about, and we've mentioned the Munsters here. We talk about monsters. Let's pivot a smidge to the Munsters themselves, one of our favorite shows back in the 60s. And
hi there, hi there.
And we're talking Fred Gwynn here. Yep.
Peachy Keno Nito Boss.
And then,
goody.
It all rings true, and just for people who don't know, Kevin Burns, first, you could tell the story better than I can, but had your first contact with someone from the Hollywood world, let's say, back when you were a child in Schenectady, I believe, writing letters to Fred Gwynn. Tell us how that started and where it's gone to now as the premier collection of Munster memorabilia as we speak. Well, believe it or not, we're going to have to stop right there. That's quite a tease for next week's show. We're going to talk about Fred Gwynn and how you were introduced to him and your Munster memorabilia collection. And we'll get into a little bit more about some of the other projects, which include Netflix Lost in Space Season 2 coming up soon. Don't forget to tune in to Unexplained with William Shatner, Fridays at 10. We here on Everything Old is New Again with Kevin Burns. We'll be back next week.